This hour of CBS Sports HQ is presented by Geico. Get more with Geico. And boy, do we have more for you today.
Finally.
I know.
100. Pete Prisco ranking his top 100 players in the NFL. Leger Douzable is here to pick it apart. I'm Chris Hassel. That's Amanda Garret.
Pete, how'd it go? Because you're already getting flack, which I think you get excited about.
No, I expect it, though.
Yeah.
It's a hard exercise, and I don't know if you guys saw Emery Hunt tried to duplicate the top 10 last night on CBS Sports HQ, and his is a disaster, so he knows how hard it is.
I won't give Pete a lot of respect. I know we talked about this last year. I was like, I messed with him and said, you know what, I'm going to do my top 100, but it is extremely hard. So instead, I did the draft grades like you did instead of doing the top 100, because I know the top 100 is extremely hard.
I move guys all around, and then I talk to people, and I say, go back and watch them, and then you know, there's injuries, and how do you factor those in? So there's a bunch of variables.
And you don't look back.
I was about to say that's something interesting.
I don't ever look back at last year's list.
All right. Well, we do have numbers from last year as well. Taking a look at 11 through 25, we're going to talk about some of the notable risers. So I will tell you some of the notable fallers. Travis Kelce going from 6 to 18. Joe Burrow falling from 3 all the way down to 15 there. And Aaron Rodgers, Pete, that's something you're getting a lot of flack for as well.
And here's the top 10. Patrick Mahomes once again #1. I'm not sure anybody can argue with that. Christian McCaffrey is in the top 10. He goes from number 27 to number 8. A drop for Josh Allen. He was second last year, down to 6 this season. All right, let's start at the very top, Pete. Patrick Mahomes, you say he's close to becoming the #1 player of all time in the NFL. Where would you put him right now?
Yeah, and Jerry Rice, to me, is the #1 player of all time. Because there's no argument to be made who's the best receiver is. You can make an argument at any other position, not at wide receiver. So Jerry Rice is that much
ahead of Tom Brady.
Ahead of Tom Brady. Wow. Yeah, it's not just about wins. And you can make a case for other people at the quarterback position. You can't make a case at all for anybody at the wide receiver position. So I think when you look at it, Patrick Mahomes on his way. If he wins this year, 3 in a row, Tom Brady never did 3 in a row. I think that puts him into the category of maybe being the best quarterback of all time and certainly in the conversation as best player of all time.
Yeah, Pete, I think undoubtedly he's the #1 player in the NFL. Now, I know he started off kind of rocky last year. They were trying to get their bearings together with all those young receivers. But I like the evolution of Patrick Mahomes. He realized that I have a championship-type defense. I don't have to go out there and throw for 400 yards. I don't have to push the ball and force it down the field. He did that in the game versus Denver. Ended up losing that game because he turned the ball over. I love doing that playoff run where he had to go to Baltimore, where he had to go to Buffalo. He literally just relied on his teammates. He took the underneath route. He took the check down. They ran the ball. And Pete, when he needed to be Super Bowl in overtime versus San Francisco 49ers, that's what he did. So I have no gripes about you making Patrick Mahomes the #1 overall player in the NFL.
Patrick Mahomes easily coming in at #1. I told you we're going to talk about some of the biggest risers. Max Crosby going from 38th last year all the way up to #11. Pete, with this Raiders team, there's not necessarily a lot of positive, or there haven't been, but how impressed have you been with his play?
I thought he was in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year last year. He was all over the field, and not just in his numbers. If you watch him on tape, the guy impacts the game on every single play. He's great against the run. He chases down plays from the backside. He's not just an effort player. People like to say, oh, he's just an effort player. No, he isn't. He's a dynamic pass rusher, and now that he has more help on the other side, and he has more help on the inside, watch out. This year might be the year he actually does win the Defensive Player of the Year.
I'm so glad you brought that up because he's literally been doing it by himself, Pete. 14.5 sacks last year. And honestly, I was going to get on you a little bit, but there was only one spot between him and Nick Bosa. I actually think he should be ranked a little bit ahead of Nick Bosa because when you look at what Nick Bosa has on his defensive line, it's not even comparable to what Max Crosby has. Max Crosby gets double teamed, triple teamed, and plays with elite effort. I rarely see defensive linemen play as many snaps. He never comes off the field, so he impacts the game in so many manners. And to your point, with Christian Wilkins on the inside pushing that pocket, we might see him take another step and another level and could potentially win the Defensive Player of the Year this year.
Real quick, how is the now 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson not even in your top 15? He comes in at 16.
Well, he's right on the outside. I mean, he's right there. I'm telling you, when you start doing this and you start putting guys in the spots, you say, is he a better player at his position than he is at that one? And I don't think he necessarily is. And Lamar Jackson's a dynamic player, but again, winning the postseason, that's an important thing.
Okay.
He had the #1 seed, and at home, you're supposed to win that game and get to the Super Bowl.
You had Joe Burrow ahead of him, and Joe Burrow.
And I think Joe Burrow, and I would take Joe Burrow if you gave me a draft of quarterbacks. and I had my choice of Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson, I would take Joe Burrow. Now, having said that, availability is the most important ability, and there's a concern with Joe Burrow. He has to stay on the field.
Yeah, so that was going to be my question. When you look at this list, the parameters for your list, like what do you take into consideration? Is it how healthy they've been, like what they did last year, or what you project them to be?
Kind of in between.
Okay.
You know, are you a rising player? Are you a player that's getting better? And I like to look for young players that maybe will be higher up on this list next year. You know, you got to project a little bit, but also what they did a year ago and where they are in terms of their health moving forward this year.
Yeah, because I know last year I gave you gruff about putting Josh Allen in front of Joe Burrow, which I thought was asinine. When you look at what Joe Burrow had done, right, went to the Super Bowl, then went to the AFC Championship game. I feel a way about you putting Joe Burrow in front of Lamar Jackson just because of what you said. Two-time MVP, #1 seed. Yes, they lost in the AFC Championship game, but he finally got over that hump, won a playoff game, had the home field advantage versus Mahomes, and they had them in the ropes on the second half. Just they turned the ball over too much and didn't run the football. And for Joe Burrow, I think you have to put into consideration your availability not being there, because I also saw on the list Jair Alexander. You dropped him a lot, and to me, he's a top 3 corner in the league when he's on the field. So that's why I asked, what's the parameters? Like, does health matter? Because if it is, it needs to apply to everybody.
It matters if you're healthy now. I mean, are you coming off a major knee? I mean, yeah, he's coming off a wrist injury, and there is concern there. Let me ask you this. If you had to pick one or the other, which one are you taking? If you have to win a playoff game, you're taking Joe Burrow healthy or Lamar Jackson?
I knew he was going to do this. I'm taking Joe Shiesty.
Yeah, there you go. So there's why he's ranked ahead of him.
All right, you mentioned Josh Allen. In 2024, we almost have to ask which one now, right?
You
because
do.
They're getting close. Last year, there was only one Josh Allen in your top 100, and he was number 2, the quarterback. This year, you moved the quarterback down to 6, and the pass rusher, Josh Allen, is all the way up to number 23, Pete.
And had his breakout season. I mean, you have 17.5 sacks. That's a heck of a season. And again, going into last year, the concern with the Jacksonville defense was, did they have a game wrecker?
Correct.
And I said it. And he wrote it on, supposedly he wrote it somewhere down on his wristband or something and told people there is a game wrecker. Well, he was the game wrecker last year.
That he was not in your top 100 list.
No, he wrote that. People didn't think he was a game wrecker. He actually wrote game wrecker on his thing, and he became a game wrecker. So when a guy gets 17.5 sacks and he's dominant against the run and a good player, I think you have to move him up. By the way, they're transitioning to a defense that's a 4-3 defense this year, which suits him even more. He might even be better this year.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen comes in. He won't have to drop in coverage as much. He was an outside linebacker. Now he can truly pin his ears back, Pete, and go after the quarterback. You talked about it, 17.5 sacks. But I'll take it one step further. You talked about game wrecker. Pete, in 4 games, he had at least 2.5 sacks. That's literally taking the game over. That Atlanta game in London, 3 sacks when they needed it the most to win that game. So Josh Allen definitely deserves to be on this list. And to your point, with Eric Armstead and Travon Walker getting better, he might even eclipse that this year. So look out for Josh Allen in Jacksonville this year.
We know how Pete feels about running backs. He has made it well known over the course of his many years working in the NFL. You do have Christian McCaffrey coming in at 8. And then to find the next one, we got to go all the way down to number 91. That is where we find Derrick Henry. With a new team, though, not with the Titans anymore. He's now with the Ravens. He dropped from 30 to 91, Pete. Is that an age thing? Was that just how the Titans were playing? Can he get better?
Well, in fairness to him, the Titans' offensive line was dreadful last year. But when backs get to be his age, with that many carries on your body, there is a drop-off. Having said that,
it's a big drop-off.
Fitting him into that offense,
I was going to say, that offense
will help him. It's a different style of offense. With the threat of Lamar being able to run, pull it, and run, it'll help him become that big-bodied back that can get those carries. But there is concern when age starts to become an issue, and not just age with him. Remember, a guy can be 30 years old and not have a ton of carries. He also has a ton of carries, so there is that concern.
And he is 30 years old.
Yeah, I don't know, Pete, you have no love for running backs, but you stated it perfectly. He had an abysmal offensive line. He still averaged 4.2 yards per carry, which was actually tied for a career low for him, which a lot of backs would take that any day of the year. And you talked about it, him going to Baltimore now. Again, will they actually run the ball when they need to, like they didn't do in the AFC Championship game? But I think he deserves to be a little bit higher on this list just because of everything you talked about. Not having a really good offensive line. They had a rookie quarterback playing. So he was the focal point of the offense, and he still went for almost 1,200 yards, Pete. So, yeah, I know people talk about positional values and running backs, but Derrick Henry, King Henry, I think still needs to be a lot higher on this list.
Yeah.
Only 2 running backs.
I disagree. But, look, it was Kyron Williams had a really good year.
I was going to say, I can't believe you didn't have him either on the list.
He just missed. He just missed. But again, I think they're all about the same. They're all interchangeable in my book. Aside from Christian McCaffrey.
Breece Hall?
Aside from Christian McCaffrey, he's the
almost
only
1,600 all-purpose yards?
He's the only one. He's different.
Wow.
Wide receivers,
That's
though,
ridiculous.
you had a bunch of them. 17 wide receivers, and I was looking for Stephon Diggs. Could not find him. He wasn't even an honorable mention for you.
Well, he was an honorable mention. He was in there as an honorable mention.
Not on the website.
Not on the list. He wasn't on the website. So it was a typo?
Totally forgot about him.
I was about to say,
He was
Actually, because here's how I know. He was actually in the list, and I moved him out and put him down there as an honorable mention. So maybe he got cut out somehow, but he's on the list.
Talk to the
You better talk to somebody. Because Pete, I was going to get at you.
Well, you can get at me all you want. Where was he in the final 8 games of the season? He was
Let's have the conversation.
It was a disappearing act.
Okay.
He did nothing. He was not the same player, and that's part of the reason why he's out the door in Buffalo. You go look at his numbers. Go look at his list.
I got some numbers for you, but I'm going to let you finish first.
Okay. He disappeared in the second half of the season.
Let's break down the numbers, right? When Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator, through 10 games, 110 targets. When they switched to Joe Brady, the last 9 games, only 75 targets. That's because your guy, Josh Allen, kept turning the football over. So what did they do? They ran the ball more effectively. They got James Cook on some angle routes to give him some easy throws. He didn't get as much targets, Pete, so he's not going to have the same amount of numbers.
He wasn't productive.
Let's not forget, Josh Allen was not Josh Allen until Stephon Diggs got there.
Josh Allen, some people think Josh Allen should have gotten MVP votes. You just have a disdain for him because you're a Jets lover.
I cannot wait to see him this year.
Josh Allen might be the MVP. He might be the MVP this year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here's the thing.
Throwing the who?
Huh?
Throwing the who?
You'll find guys. The guy carries that team.
Whom is what it is. We got to talk to you about Aaron Rodgers really fast, because when you came in on set, and that's the first thing you mentioned, he was 29 last year. This is before he got hurt. He played 4 snaps. He is now 20.
And here's why. Here's why. You look at the grouping in there, and I said this earlier, from 18 maybe down to 40, there isn't a great group of guys that you can make a case for them being higher. CeeDee Lamb might have been the only one. Aside from that, you look at the group behind him, there's not really a case. So Aaron Rodgers, by the way, is still Aaron Rodgers, in case anybody's wondering, aside from the fact that he had the Achilles tendon. But guys come back from Achilles. Heck, we thought he could play last year at the end of last year. He will be fine, even if he doesn't show up for minicamp.
Have we found him yet?
No. He's in a retreat somewhere. But you know what? It doesn't matter. He was there the entire offseason. It doesn't matter.
You know I love AA run. I think that's entirely too high. All due respect, 4-time MVP, 1-time Super Bowl MVP champ. When you look at what he's done, right, the 4 plays last year, then he was out for the whole season. That's why I always ask you the parameters for this list. Does injuries, does that come into fruition for that? And then also, when coming off 2022, which wasn't a terrible year, but by his standards it was 26-8. I think he threw for under 3,500 yards, which he had 4 or 5 straight seasons with 4,000 yards throwing the ball. Like, to me, even though C.J. Stroud was only a rookie last year, I think he should have been higher than Aaron Rodgers on this list. Like, we talk about it all the time, how special C.J. Stroud is. Nobody was talking about that receiving core. Nobody was talking about the Houston Texans, and C.J. Stroud took them to the divisional round last year.
Do it again. Do it again.
I hear you.
Do it again. That's all. I mean, look, I love C.J. Stroud. I've compared him to Marino, but do it again. Show me again, and then he's a top 10 quarterback.
We absolutely love having you guys here on set. The NBA Finals took it out of me. I'm not going to lie. So I'm excited to be talking about some NFL. The season begins September 8th. If you want a countdown, we love a good countdown. That is 79 days away. You can stream the entire season. Also, those games on CBS on Paramount+.
We are breaking down Pete Prisco's top 100 player rankings by teams. Makes sense. The Super Bowl favorites from San Francisco have the most with 9, and then a trio of teams with 7 on that least side. Wow, Buffalo Bills only 1. Cleveland Browns only 1. And the Colts and Commanders have 0. So let's bring Pete Prisco and Leger Douzable back in here. The 49ers leading the way with 9. Now, that's, we're only ranking the top 100 here. Does that make them, in your mind, the best team overall in the league?
Yeah, but you have to put an asterisk next to it because the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. he equalizes it all. I mean, that's the difference.
You did have Purdy as one of those 9 players.
Yeah, and I think Purdy doesn't get the credit he deserves as a quarterback. I think last year he proved to a lot of people, including myself, that he could be their guy. But it helps that you have all his talent around. And you look at this group. I mean, Trent Williams, best left tackle in the game. McCaffrey, best running back in the game. Nick Bosa, arguably one of the top 3 or 4 pass rushers. Fred Warner, best off-the-ball linebacker. George Kittle didn't play as well catch numbers-wise, but still best dual, probably threat tight end in the league because he's a great blocker. Ayuk, we see what people are doing for him. Ward had a great couple of years in San Francisco, and then Samuel and Purdy. So it's a good group of guys, and they are the best team, talent-wise.
Yeah, Pete, there's a reason why they're the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl again, just like they were last year. When you look at that team, perennial Pro Bowlers up and down and all pros on the list. So it's funny, we were looking at that list of all the teams that had multiple players on the top 100. Everybody in that left column made the playoffs. Surprise, surprise, right? You have good players, you make a playoff run. So not surprised at all that the 49ers have the most players. I think they are the best and most complete team in the league. But like you said, that asterisk, that Superman plays in Kansas City, so it's hard to beat them.
And I do think those odds have changed a little bit because we saw them in even odds right now with the 49ers and the Chiefs. But it was for a while the 49ers were ahead of the Chiefs. So let's talk about the Chiefs. They have 7 players there, but yeah, Patrick Mahomes, he might be equal to 7 players, Pete. And so far, it doesn't matter if you're the 49ers or any other team. The Chiefs have been the team to beat.
Yeah, and we talked about it, the defense last year. The defense across the board was outstanding. Now, L'Jarius Sneed is gone, but they still have a lot of guys they like. McDuffie was outstanding on the corner last year. He's emerged as a big-time player. They have a lot of nice mix of youth to go with the veteran players like Kelsey and Mahomes and Chris Jones, and I think that's where they are as a team. They do a great job of replenishing. And, you know, we look at the wide receiver position. That was a major concern all last year. Rasheed Rice became a big-time player down the stretch. Then you look at some of the other guys they've added. They'll be fine at wide receiver. Hollywood Brown. They're going to be fine at wide receiver. This team has the best inside 3, and you see them right there. Humphrey, Tooney, and Trey Smith. Best inside 3 in the league. They get away with having bad tackles by the fact that they're so good on the inside. That's why all 3 of those guys are on the list.
Do you think the Rams will push that inside 3?
Maybe.
Because they have a really
got to transition at center, though.
But yeah, to your point, when you look at this team, like the way they've been able to evolutionize themselves and change so many different ways. We've talked about it before. Patrick Mahomes, going back to 2019 or even 2 years ago, would have to go out there and throw for over 300 yards to win games and throw for 3 or 4 touchdowns. Well, now he has a championship-type defense. You talked about it, Chris Jones. A lot of people consider him the best defensive player in all the league, right? Trent McDuffie, all-pro at the slot position last year, can play on the outside as well. And yes, they did lose to L'Jarius Sneed, but Jalen Watson and Josh Williams have played a lot of football. There's a reason why they drafted 3 corners in 1 year, because they were already banking on potentially losing L'Jarius Sneed. I think Reed doesn't get enough. Justin Reed does not get enough credit for what he actually does in defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo's defense. He literally is a jack of all trades. They have him in the box. They have him middle field safety. He blitzes off the edge. He does it all for them. Patrick Mahomes just holds it together and brings it together. And he's realized he's grown and knows that I don't have to go out there and be Superman. As long as I get it to my playmakers, I can rely on my defense and we can win championships.
If you were going to get them, last year was the year to get them. They will be better than they were a year ago this year.
That's bad news for the Bills, who only have 1 player in your top 100. Now, it's a great player. It's Josh Allen. He fell from 2 to 6 in your rankings from last year to this year. But if you're a Bills fan, how do you expect to potentially get over the hump against the Chiefs, against the Ravens, when you only have 1 top 100 player?
Well, they also have a lot of really good players and not great players. And you look at the roster, and you mentioned pass catchers. Kincaid will emerge as a big-time pass catcher this year. Dawson Knox and Kincaid weren't on the field a ton last year. They're going to play a lot of 2 tight end set. Cook is a big-time running back. He's just not a top 100 player. You go to the offensive line, you look at that group across the board, there's not a top 100 player, but they had a really good year last year. Same on the defensive line. I mean, there's, you know, Ed Oliver was borderline top 100. I took him in and moved him out. Milano would be a top 100 player, but, you know, we don't know where he is coming off that injury. That was a pretty significant injury. You know, the normal guys on the back end, Poyer and Hyde, aren't there. So it's a team in transition with a lot of really good players with one great quarterback. That's where they are right now.
But that's why I think they'll struggle. There's too much transition on this team. You talked about them only having one player in it being Josh Allen. We just saw the list of pass catchers. When you look at that list, at the receiver position, only one receiver caught passes from Josh Allen the previous year, and that was Khalil Shakir. Everybody else is new, and you know this, Pete. It takes time to build up to build up that continuity. And I think it's going to be a struggle for them. I think they will. We saw a philosophy change. They will run the ball more with James Cook. They're going to get him more involved in the pass game. But my concern is what happens if they're down in games? Do we see the Josh Allen of old with hero ball now that he doesn't have a true #1 receiver that he can rely on? That is my concern for the Buffalo Bills.
Let him play. Let him be Josh Allen. He's fine.
Let him play.
He's fine. And by the way, we look at their defense. A year ago, they had guys missing across the board. Their defense this year will be better than the defense that was put on the field last year. Absolutely.
They lost Leonard Floyd, who led them in sacks. So who's going to come off the edge and get those sacks?
They have some young guys they like.
They do. We'll see.
So it's somewhat a similar situation when it comes to the Browns. Only one player in the top 100. But that's Myles Garret coming in at #2. You talked about transition and continuity. The Bills have it with the quarterback position. The Browns definitely don't. 5 last year. You get Deshaun Watson returning. But you also, Pete, have Kevin Stefanski. It's a very tough division. How are the Browns going to stack up?
Look, they had health issues last year as much as any. And a lot of guys, Nick Chubb would be probably on this list.
For sure.
I mean, he's coming off a major knee injury again. That's hard to do for a running back, which is why he's not on the list. They had all their offensive linemen didn't play as well last year. They were in and out of the lineup. A lot of guys got hurt. And I think that's why you see guys not on this list. If Deshaun Watson can come back and be anything like they expected him to be when they gave all that money, they'll push for a playoff spot again.
Yeah, we did the schedule breakdown, about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
You got the Browns winning
I got the Browns winning the AFC North,
okay,
and I'm doubling down. Right, Myles Garret, rightfully so, Defensive Player of the Year, should be in the top 5. You have him at #2. This was a top 2 or 3 defense in the NFL, and it's spearheaded by this guy right here. I mean, he gets doubled and triple teamed, and yet he still finds a way to get to the quarterback. He's that explosive. Jim Schwartz has his defense playing at an elite level, Pete. It's because he doesn't have them thinking too much. He lets them go out there and play free and have fun, and that's why they've been so good. To your point, if Deshaun Watson can just return to some of the glimpse that we saw when he was with the Houston Texans, I think this team is going to be hard to beat because, Amanda, you stated it. 5 different quarterbacks, and yet you still went to the playoffs, lets you know how dominant this defense is. And you talked about it on their offense. Their top 3 offensive tackles missed a significant part of the year. They come back healthy. Watch out for the Browns. I think they're, plus 550 in the AFC North to win. Go ahead and sprinkle a little money on that. I'm telling you, the Browns are going to win the AFC North.
But like Buffalo, they don't have a lot of guys that you could say should be in the top 100. I mean, Denzel Ward could be maybe, but he's a good player. The other corner, Emerson, good player, but not a top 100. The linebackers, not a top 100 player. So you have a lot of good players, but not a lot of great players. And I think that's where they are as a team.
All right, let's go to the 2 teams that do not have a single player in Pete Prisco's top 100. It's the Colts and it's the Commanders. I did look at the honorable mention. Colts have 4 honorable mentions, including the first one off your list, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor, when you look at him, again, he could be in this list. I'm just running back partial, but you could make a case for him being at the bottom of the list. Wasn't as good last year, clearly. He needs to get back to being Jonathan Taylor. The guy that most people will ping me on for the Colts is Quentin Nelson because he's been a perennial big-time player. Didn't play very well last year. Was not very good, which is why he dropped out of the top guys. And so the Colts, they have a lot of good. They're another team has good players, but not a lot of great players.
I'm not pinging you on Quentin Nelson. DeForest Buckner, I thought, should have been on your top 100. Yeah. Another 8-sack season. People don't talk about the Colts team, period, because a lot of people didn't have high expectations for them. They were 1 game away from winning the division. And that defensive line and that defense as a whole, right, 4th in the NFL in sacks, and nobody talked about them. They had a couple guys that had 8 sacks, 9 sacks, a couple guys that had 7 sacks. They are a deep group. Like you said, they don't have any stalwart stars, but they have a really good group. And when I looked at your list, I love that you gave love to the defensive tackles, right? Because a lot of people don't. He had 10 defensive tackles on there. I thought DeForest Buckner should have been on there. Now, you did put him on the honorable mention, but I thought
which defensive tackle should he have been ahead of?
He should have been ahead of Derrick Brown, I thought. Derrick Brown's a good run stopper, but in today's NFL, you have to affect the quarterback. He doesn't. And Aleem McNeil, which I love, and I love that you put him on there. I think he should have been ahead of him, too.
Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Allen, the two players for the Commanders.
But I do like a lot of their young talent. Keep an eye on that team. They're moving in the right direction.
I thought you had them as like a potential playoff team last year,
I did.
too.
And keep an eye on them. No, the offensive line was a disaster.
I'm still waiting for the Bengals.
There are stories that you hear about that team that there was no way they were winning last year.
Man.
No regime over there. Pete Prisco with his top 100 players. You can find the whole list at CBSSports.com and get all your breakdowns over on the CBS Sports YouTube page, including quarterback rankings, 17 wide receivers in those top 100, only 2 running backs. We know how Pete feels about them. Top defensive and offensive players over there on the YouTube page of CBS Sports.